Good morning, men. Good morning. Hey, Matt, thanks for that kind introduction. You made it sound so much better than what I wrote last night. It really is a pleasure for me to be here with you this morning. First of all, I love men's ministry, and I love what Impact Players is all about. In fact, you guys remember Promise Keepers, right? Well, I think it was in 1969 that we attended the Promise Keepers event in Washington, D.C. And it was that's what started me on men's ministry. So I've been a part of men's ministry for decades. And so I'm a firm believer in what you guys do and recognizing how important it is to come together in fellowship as iron sharpens iron. Amen? Amen. First of all, thank you, Matt and Warren, for inviting me this morning. Warren wasn't kidding when he told me that you guys serve this incredible breakfast every month, and so it was fantastic. Thanks to the chef and the staff for really putting that together for us. Yeah. And so I can understand why this breakfast is a draw. And here I thought that you guys came to hear me speak this morning. I could tell just from all the activity this morning and all of the hugging and the chatting that you probably didn't get a chance to look at the two table questions that I had planned out that's on the handout in front of you. And maybe you haven't had a chance to discuss those two questions at your table, but I would encourage you to grab a buddy, maybe not today, maybe at some other point in time, and I would challenge you to actually have a conversation surrounding those first two questions about legacy. I've been studying, researching, and really seeking God for the last 20 years on this whole topic of legacy. And I just think it's incredible, and it's important, particularly for us men, to really have a handle on what legacy God has in store for you. And I'll have some more comments about that. I want to make a couple of other shout outs. Are there any guys here from Westminster Church? No one? Yeah. Okay. So I had the opportunity to speak to their men's group about a month ago, and what a pleasure that was. And so I appreciate what you guys do in terms of your men's ministry. And so thanks for coming out this morning. One and all for coming out. It's probably not advisable for someone who recently published a book to admit that I am no expert on the subject of legacy, and far from it. But I have devoted over a decade in thinking about and studying really the overwhelming information that's out there regarding the topic of legacy. I was chatting with Reed earlier this morning, and he was so excited about hearing what I had to say, and I'm going, oh my goodness! I mean, I'm going to let him down because seriously, but and I'm still learning, and it seemed to me as I've been studying, praying, and really thinking about the whole topic of legacy. The more that I learned, the more that I gathered, the more information and wisdom I received, the less I knew about the topic. Have you ever had that feeling on any subject that you looked into deeply? And so it's humbling for me, especially as a new author, because I do not consider myself any kind of a writer at all. It was only because of God's blessing and God's leading that I'm at this point. So You know, I even though I've been convinced that legacy is an incredibly important topic for me and my family, I always got stuck on, well, where do I start? How do I begin this legacy journey? When should I start? What should I do? These were all questions that haunted me for a number of years, and I just wouldn't let go of God until He gave me an answer. Well, He's been gracious to reveal some of these answers, but He hasn't told me all, and I don't suspect that He will. And so therefore, I decided in the height of COVID, during the height of COVID, God was asking me, because I had all this research material in my possession, again, for over the last decade, but it really was difficult for me to get to the point of actually writing a book. And so God challenged me during the height of COVID, what are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? I've given you this message, okay? And all I'm asking for you to do is to be faithful with that message. And so this book is an expression of hopefully my faithfulness to what God has taught me about legacy for more than a decade. And so the book itself is not a how-to book. It's really telling one man's story about my legacy journey. But God has also shown me some ways of approaching legacy. And so therefore, in my book, I've come up with kind of a very simple framework, which could serve as a starting point for someone who wants to seriously consider and think about legacy. And it's flexible enough to be able to adopt it to your unique family situation. And so my prayer and hope has always been, since the book was published about 2 weeks ago, that it will ignite a passion in you and your family to really build a legacy of generosity that will last for generations. So, what I want to do this morning is to briefly introduce you to 3 concepts that have fueled my passion for intentional legacy building. And they appear on your handout, so follow with me. The first point is, your legacy is not just about you, but, and I'll finish that later. Number 2, radical generosity will supercharge your legacy of kingdom impact. And third, you have the God-given power to impact the future of your family for generations. And if I'm careful about not rambling on, we'll have some time at the end, hopefully about 10 minutes or so, for some Q&A. Actually, the Q&A is my favorite part of these presentations. And so as during my presentation, if you think about it, if a question comes to mind, please jot it down on your handout. And if I don't get to your question, my contact information is at the bottom of the page of the handout. And so please feel free to contact me and we can have a dialogue on that. Okay, you guys ready for this? Yeah. All right, number 1, your legacy is not just about you, but it does start with you. There's a story that has been passed down for generations within the Jewish faith about Rabbi Akiva. The story has been told that late one afternoon, as the sun was beginning to set in the west, Rabbi Akiva was walking along the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee on his way home to Capernaum. During his trip, we're told that he was meditating and reciting the Hebrew scriptures. In fact, he was so focused upon the text that he didn't realize that instead of turning left toward the gate, the city gates of Capernaum, he had taken a right turn, and as the sun began to sink behind the mountains, he found that the path that he was taking had led him to a large gate of a Roman fortress. As Rabbi Akiva stood in front of the gate, realizing what had happened, he heard a voice come down from above the gate. It was the voice of a Roman sentry guard standing on top of the wall. The guard shouted down, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Rabbi Akiva was startled and could only respond to these frightening words with, "What?" Again, the guard called down, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Rabbi Akiva had a few moments to gather his thoughts, and he shouted back into the dark at the Roman guard, "How much do you get paid to ask me those questions?" The guard was now confused as to why this stranger would ask him such a question. So after a few moments of silence, he said, 2 drachma per week. 1 drachma is worth about a day's wage. Then Rabbi Akiva, with intense conviction, shouted back to the Roman sentry, "I'll pay you double if you stand outside my house and ask me those 2 questions every morning." Who are you? What are you doing here? These 2 existential questions have continually challenged me for as long as I can remember. And I suspect that many of you have been challenged with them as well. I believe that these 2 questions are the starting point in building a lasting legacy. While your legacy is not just about you, it does start with you. For decades, I climbed the corporate ladder, traveled the world, thinking that I had reached the pinnacle of my life's calling. While I might have been living the American dream, I realized over time that my legacy was nominal. Sure, I had money to pass on to my children, but is that all I had to offer them? What about the impact of those who came before me? The lessons learned, the wisdom gained, my roller coaster faith journey. Would those things become lost once I passed away? Would my cumulative life's work be nothing more than a shoebox of photos and a last will and testament? While I had very few answers at the time, at least I knew where to begin. At least I knew where to go. As a believer, I knew that the answers I was seeking could only come from the creator of the heavens and the earth, who made me in his image and who ordained me with a life's mission. What mission has God given you? How has he uniquely gifted you to enter into radical generosity and create a legacy that will last long after you're gone? If you're like most people, you may be scratching your head at these questions. You may have a loose handle on your personal calling and purpose on this earth, but if pressed for details, you might come up empty-handed. I believe that to zero in on your passions, dreams, strengths, and goals and figure out your unique role in God's kingdom, a personal mission statement is crucial. There are tons of resources about how to do that. I'm not going to get into those details now. I didn't do that in my book, but I do describe a process that I went through personally in coming up with my personal mission statement. But regardless of the process that you use to come up with it, studies have shown that those who write down their vision and goals are more likely to reach them. If you don't declare who you are and the role that you play in God's kingdom, You leave it to others to fill in the blanks. When I was growing up, my immigrant parents taught me and my siblings to persevere, to keep our heads down and to work hard. We weren't encouraged to speak up or cause any conflicts, even in the face of discrimination and bullying. This approach fit what America had expected from Asian America since the late 1880s. It's only recently that the Asian American community has begun to speak up and basically saying, we won't be silent anymore. We are taking control of our personal mission statements, so to speak. We won't let others define that for us any longer. So, how has the world put you in a box? How has the narrative about who you are and what you're capable of preventing you from growing into your true identity as a child of God? More importantly, how has your lack of action prevented you from living your best legacy? So, your legacy may start with you, but it's not just about you. In his book, Outliers, by Malcolm Gladwell, Malcolm posits that, quote, we pay too much attention to what successful people are like and too little attention to where they are from, that is, their culture, their family, their generation. I can relate to that. Again, as a son of Chinese immigrants, I grew up with very little. For the first 12 years of my life, we lived in public housing in New York City, barely above the poverty level. My dad immigrated to this great country at 14, and at 18, he enlisted in the US Navy and saw action in Normandy on D-Day on an LST. At a time when Chinese immigrants, including those who served during World War II, were not allowed to become US citizens because of the Chinese Exclusion Act. During my childhood years, our family faced all manner of discrimination and bullying, and despite all these attempts to make us feel like second-class citizens, it did not deter my parents from their mission of making the United States their adopted home. Through their struggles, they left us with something so much more valuable than a healthy trust fund. Their experiences and teachings nurtured in us a drive to succeed and taught us the value and virtue of having a strong work ethic. And so I owe much, if not all of my successes and accomplishments to their legacy. That's why my legacy is not just about me. But there's more. I believe that God has given us the opportunity to speak into the lives of those who follow us. Proverbs 13:22 says that a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. I used to think that this verse referred to money. But God has taught me over the years that it's so much more than that. Real family wealth is found in a family's faith, heritage, beliefs, values, wisdom, so forth and so on. The key is how intentional I will be in preserving and passing along our true family wealth, tangible and intangible, in a way that will live on to benefit future generations. Number 2, radical generosity will supercharge your legacy of kingdom impact. The Legacy Continuum is my term for describing the potential kingdom impact that you and your family could have on the world by taking a multi-generational approach to generosity. It leverages the efforts of those before us and shows the unbounded potential of those who follow us. In drawing from the past, building on the present, and setting the trajectory for future generations, you have it within your power to grow the collective kingdom impact on the world through increasing generosity at an exponential rate. I have a diagram in my book that depicts this legacy continuum. And it shows that the more generous we are, the greater the kingdom impact we will have. It also shows that this impact builds on itself if we pursue kingdom generosity generation after generation. Do you remember the scene from the Fellowship of the Ring when the Fellowship had just entered into the mines of Moria? If you remember that, during an exchange between Gandalf and Frodo, Frodo is clearly dismayed when he says, "I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened." And Gandalf replies, "So do all who live to see such times. But that is not for you to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us." That is one of my all-time favorite movie scenes. But with all due respect to Gandalf and Mr. Tolkien, I have borrowed and reworked that last line for the purpose of describing the nature of generosity, which I believe is at the center of my evolving legacy, and I hope and pray that it will also be at the center of yours as well. My restatement says, all we have to decide is what to do with the time, talent, and treasure that has been given to us. The words time, talent, and treasure are not my terms. They come from a book that has profoundly altered the way I think about generosity. And some of you know what book I'm referring to. It's The Treasure Principle by Randy Alcorn. From this book and many others, I've developed a philosophy of generosity that is multidimensional in nature. It's not just about the money we give. It's also about giving of ourselves, of our time and our talent. You know, for most of my life, I equated giving and my possessions in monetary terms. We need to start thinking about our true possessions in terms of time, talent, and treasure. The plain truth is that for many of us here, writing a check, even for a worthy cause, is less burdensome than, and may not be as impactful as blessing others with our God-given talent and time. Here's a deep, dark secret of mine. I do not consider myself a naturally generous person. When I retired from the corporate world in 2014 and moved to Bellingham, I asked God to teach me how to be a more generous person and to give me opportunities to be able to share and utilize my time, unlimited, limited talent, and certainly limited treasure. Soon after we arrived in Bellingham, I was introduced to an executive director of a local nonprofit involved with the homeless. He had recently assumed this position, and after a few conversations with him, it became apparent to me that he needed help to think more strategically about moving his 90-year-old organization forward. This was a perfect fit for my background in corporate strategy. So I committed myself to helping him shape his organization. We met steadily for a year and developed a solid relationship, a solid mentoring relationship. And I learned, not only did he learn about the importance of strategy and strategic thinking, even in a nonprofit, I also learned a lot about the homeless. I wasn't writing checks, big checks to him at the time. I wasn't looking to have a building named after me, but what I was giving him was what I believe he needed the most, which happened to be something that was directly in my wheelhouse. I was exercising my God-given privilege of blessing others, not only with my treasure, but also with my God-given time and talent. My third and last point, creating a family culture of generosity will pay kingdom dividends for generations. Here's a question that will stop you in your tracks by Socrates himself. Quote, "Fellow citizens, why do you burn and scrape every stone to gather wealth and take so little care of your children, to whom you must one day relinquish all?" If that doesn't stop you in your tracks, I don't know what will. Because when I first heard this, it just hit me at my core. His question haunted me for a long time. When I first started thinking about legacy, it was mind-blowing to realize that what I do during my life could have an influence on people living decades from now. And leaving a meaningful legacy doesn't happen automatically. By pouring into the lives of others, I can change their future. By passing on the things that I've learned, the mistakes that I've made, the family stories that have shaped me, I can better prepare my children and my grandchildren, and they can in turn prepare future generations. But it takes intentionality and effort. This is the essence of the Legacy Continuum. I also realize that when my family is on board and joins me in these efforts, when we become a team running the race of life together, then the things that we do, the faith that we hold dear, the money that we give, and the wisdom we pass on multiply over time. One of the ways of building a family culture of generosity is by meeting regularly with your family. For my family, we call them family partnership meetings. And my book spends a lot of time talking about our efforts over a decade in making this work. And certainly talks about all the challenges that we faced in doing that. I mean, after all, families are messy, are they not? Everyone is busy. There are infinite number of demands on each of us, but the world is redefining the family in ways that are in direct opposition to God's plan. So the question is whether you believe your family is worth fighting for. Is it worth the effort to bring them together and declare to the world what your family is all about and what it stands for? I believe that the future of our families is at stake. So before we get to Q&A, I just want to say that this is fantastic. I love being here this morning. When I began writing this book, I never thought in a million years that I would ever get it published. My goal was never to be a famous author. It wasn't about selling a ton of books. I think I've given away more than I've sold. It's about encouraging people to discover that God has given each and every one of you the ability to impact the future for His sake. I'm 72 years old, and it would be natural for someone to look at me and say, you know what, this guy is old enough to think about legacy, thinning hair and all. And But I've come to understand over the years that legacy is not just a topic for old people, nor is it a topic that is solely tied to death and dying. In fact, I believe this topic deals just as much with life and living than it does with death. In order to leave something meaningful behind, more meaningful than possessions, you need to decide how you want to live your life in the here and now. A legacy is built over a lifetime, not toward the end of one's life. Putting it another way, whether you realize it or not, regardless of how old you are, you're building a legacy that will get passed on to the next generation. The real question is, will it be a legacy worth living? And how intentional will you be in building such a legacy? My prayer is that God, by his infinite wisdom and according to his will use my book to encourage and to help you change the trajectory of your life and the life of all the generations that come from you. Thanks for your attention. Warren, how much time do we have?
We've got time for a couple questions.
Okay.
And then Coach has got some final remarks.
Okay, great. So any questions, guys, that you might have? I realize that I hit you with quite a bit. Yes?
In addition to your book, what other resources might be available for gentlemen to research legacy and ideas?
Oh my goodness! I mean, as I said in my remarks, if you Google legacy or legacy building or legacy planning or any combination, you will get a ton of information. The information that I've gotten over the years has come from various sources. I mean, certainly since I've been a part of National Christian Foundation for well over almost 2 decades, organizations like NCF, Ron Blue, a lot of these organizations that you probably know of have resources that talk about legacy. But to me, the real question is, you've got to spend some time. We all have to spend some time, one-on-one time, with the creator of the heavens and the earth to really give us an idea. I mean, I was all over the map before I finally spent that quiet time with our Lord and Savior and asked him, what do you want me to do? And from that point on, he will then direct your path. Until then, I was just wandering all over the place. Yes?
What does a family partnership meeting look like in your case?
Okay, it's over the 10 years that we've been doing it, it has morphed so many times. And so I'm a very disciplined person, right? Being an engineer by training. And so my kids, when they were younger, they would laugh at me and poke fun at me because I would have this written agenda. I mean, they were maybe 18 or 20 at the time, and they would just laugh at me. But I believe that it takes that level of intentionality to really make this work. They have to realize, understand, and know what to expect. And the other tip that I can give is that each of these meetings, there needs to be a very clear stated purpose. You're not going to capture the attention of your children if it's just a meeting that rambles on, even if you're talking about neat stuff like who do we give to as a family, okay? One of the benefits that I didn't realize when I started our family partnership meetings is the benefit and the pleasure and the joy that we all had when we prayed for each other at the very end of our meetings. I'm old enough where I don't hold back on my questions from my 2 daughters. And so I will ask them how their marriage life is going. I will ask them what issues they're having financially. And we get to pray with one another, which honestly, before we started these meetings, Yeah, we would pray occasionally, and of course on special occasions and all of that, but to be able to do it with intentionality, with a purpose in mind, is a joy that is beyond expression. Hope that answered your question. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.